Right, good afternoon, everyone. Today is the 21st of July meeting of the Children Education and Communities Policy and Scrutiny Committee. I'm Councillor Simon Dodney, I'm going to be chairing the meeting this evening. First of all, welcome everyone. I have apologies from Councillor Baker because Hunter has joined us as substitute, Councillor Webb because Luca has joined us as substitute, and Councillor Heaton, who I believe is unwell. Right. I've changed the order of items on the agenda slightly to allow some of the visitors to leave a bit earlier. So I'm taking item 7 first. That is the annual update report on the libraries and leisure facilities. So who would like to start? Andy, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you and good evening, members. I just wanted to introduce the report, and I've got colleagues from Explore and GLL here to present their reports. But we're going to give you an overview this evening of last year and a bit of previous years in terms of the contract management of GLL and Explore and what they've been up to. Now, it's been a while that this report has been to scrutiny, so it's the first time in the new format of the contract. And really, we're wanting feedback this evening. So if the reports, you can offer any feedback that you'd like it in a different style or anything like that, please do comment with that at the end. In terms of the annexes, these reports have been produced independently by Explore and GLL, and it's to give you their direct feedback. They're an honest reflection of what's been going on, with lots of highlights, impacts, achievements, and investments. And I think it's also worth noting that both organisations really stepped up during the COVID to assist our communities in York. They've also amazingly opened new venues since the contract started and brought in external grants that wouldn't be available to the council. The depth of partnership working is truly remarkable in the report, and there's lots of notes of that, and I would really like you to pay attention to that, because that really does benefit us from delivering it ourselves. And I want to highlight paragraph 4 in the report, just to reflect that there is a full performance management arrangement as part of the contract arrangements now, where there weren't previously. So I think the final point I wanted to make before I hand over is Verito have just completed an audit on the monitoring of the GLL contract, and with the conclusion that there is a general sound system of governance and risk management and controls in place, which is a good start. So I'd like to hand you over now to Sarah Garbach, and she will introduce the Explore report.
Hi, evening everybody, and thanks for inviting us to this scrutiny meeting. It's been a pleasure actually to pull the report together and actually look back over the last 2 or 3 years and do a little bit of looking ahead. So it's been a good experience to pull this together. In order to kind of show and demonstrate how we achieve and deliver on our contract, we work to these kind of 6 key principles as an organisation, hence why I've arranged the report in that way, as you see when you go through it. Before we hand over for questions, I just wanted to do a very quick overview of the content of the report, given that it's the first time that we've been to scrutiny. And of course, that very first year, when probably we would have been coming in 2019, we didn't have the full year because, of course, the pandemic hit us as an organisation. And like the rest of the city, it was a real shock to us as an organisation. But we very, very quickly pivoted, and we absolutely saw that first and foremost was our role as that key information provider for the city. So we very kind of quickly shifted that online information offer so people could access that trusted, reliable data, because if you remember at the time, there was lots of misinformation happening. There was all the fake news, the government's legalities around what you could and couldn't do in relation to the pandemic was changing daily. So we played a really vital role in getting that absolutely accurate, trusted information out to communities. And then we moved to ways in which we could continue to bring people together. So we brought our activity programme online, again, providing that kind of that small way of bringing kind of our communities together, just making a little bit of difference in terms of people's well-being and hopefully easing their isolation. And on the physical delivery side, we found alternative ways of getting books to people, at first by continuing with our home library delivery service, and then via our click and collect. And we also help people to get back online as soon as we were absolutely able to offer that service, because that was a real key priority for us. We wanted to support people with their digital skills. People had been disconnected again if they didn't have devices at home. So again, as soon as we could, we got people in, back connected to their digital lives, again, helping to bring people together, but also to support their job searches, because we knew we were in a situation where potentially people did lose jobs as a result of the pandemic. And as Andy's already mentioned, we were also there supporting that community hubs. So all of our Explore centres became community hubs, and our staff were out there helping people with their prescriptions, with their shopping, so we could get to people who had to isolate. And then in the winter of 2020, central government actually recognised libraries as an essential service. So during that second lockdown, we remained open to provide that digital access and to get books to people as well. Those two kind of priority areas. So really, that was our experience during that lockdown year. And then this last couple of years, really, we've emerged out of the pandemic really strong. We've bounced back very well. There's lots of information in the report about our performance, but at this exact moment in time, we're about 80% back recovered in terms of the visits and our footfall, which if you compare that to the national average in terms of libraries, which are generally at 65–70%, that's a really good reflection of the significance that we have for our communities in York and how valuable libraries see, how valuable residents see their libraries within those local communities. We've had month-on-month growth throughout the past year, and actually through the first 3 months of this year, as we continue to respond to residents and customer needs, and actually just being there for people and showing how we make a difference to people's communities. A little story that happened to me last week when I was out in one of my libraries, and a manager came up to talk to me about a customer that they had in for the first time since the pandemic, and it was a customer who was in with a carer, somebody who had quite severe mental, physical disabilities, and actually since the pandemic had been non-verbal, so his carer was there to do the supporting and the asking around the books. She had to take a phone call, so the member of staff just carried on with that kind of conversation, helping him with his books, and actually had remembered him from before and was talking to him about the kinds of books that he liked and wanted to read. And he actually started talking back and had a conversation with that member of staff. And that was the first time that he had actually started to speak. So the carer just stood back from the phone call, experienced that, let the conversation obviously carry on, and then just came to us afterwards and just said, I cannot tell you how significant that is. I can't wait to go back to his mum and share that information. So I think that just shows the power of what we do, how safe and welcoming our spaces are, and how safe and welcoming our staff members are and staff teams are, and just being that recognisable face in the community is so powerful. So that's just kind of one story, and we hear these day in, day out. So that's really to show that what we're about really is about community, and we're about people. At the minute, we're recruiting for new community directors to support our board, and that will be people from within the community, people who are using our services, who are really engaged with us as an organisation. We're reviewing our volunteering opportunities, so looking at what else we can be offering for the communities to get involved with the library service, to continue with that skills development, and to support people again to get back into the community, again supporting with that social isolation. And of course we continue with the breadth of what we offer, supporting people's well-being. helping people to get online, helping improving those literacy levels, again, as we've emerged out of the pandemic. And now we're all adjusting to those challenges in the rise of cost of living, and we absolutely have a role to play there. You know, we've got free books, free access to information, free Wi-Fi, free PCs, brilliant community events and activities, our rhyme times, our craft groups, our readers groups, and we're about to enter another period of our summer reading challenge, where we're having a lot of free or low-cost activities for family at this time of need. And of course, we look forward to being able to deliver much more of that in our communities in Haxby and Wigginton and Clifton and Acombe, thanks to the £7.7 million capital investment from City of York Council as well, which is a real boom for us. So that's kind of the end of my summary, and it's over to you if there's any questions from the report.
Thank you very much, Sarah. That's very helpful. Any questions from members? Councillor Fitzpatrick.
Thank you for that, and certainly excellent work, really, I would say on that. And particularly the awards, the national awards for staff, that speaks for itself, doesn't it, really? So that is excellent. I am very close in the community where I live and represent to Hungate, so we do have the cafe there, and I think you're kind of almost underselling it, really, in terms of how you're describing it, because it is a hub. I say in inverted commas because that means different things to different people, but it does an awful lot for local community. It has sessions that link in with Red Tower, which is the food bank on a Monday morning. It deals massively with socialisation. So I would just say thank you on that side of things. I think, you know, wonderful, really good report, and well done. Is it appropriate to ask questions now about GLL, or are we coming on to that later?
I think we're going to that.
Stick with the library. Yep.
Any other members ask any questions to Sarah? Councillor Luca.
I mean, I share Councillor Fitzpatrick's commendations. It's a wonderful report. And obviously reading it, you are very much at the heart of so many diverse communities. I mean, some of us think of you as, you know, the central library, which I still prefer to call it. But you are now really spread out across the city with Town Hall, Haxby, soon to be up and running. And I wondered, you are such an obvious place that people pop into. Could you see opportunities for expanding your, in a sense, hub role? Ways in which you could work with the council to perhaps improve some of the options that are available, because people go to you, they know where you are, in the sense that they don't always know where other things are. And I just wondered if you could see opportunities that might be available for you to improve your service as a hub.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at the Burnholm model as a start in terms of the community partners that work with us from that building, and that being replicated at Clifton, as we develop Clifton, and we are looking to work with different service providers from the same site, so that there are those other community partners. But absolutely, in terms of kind of the council services we do, we already are working with, we have very close relationships with our local area coordinators in terms of all of our libraries. There's nods around the table, so you recognise that. So there's already a very strong partnership there, and some local area coordinators use the library as a bit of a drop-down base as well. There's the digital inclusion support that we're helping with residents with at the moment. As the household support fund is being available for people to apply for. We've had a role in helping people access that. So on CYC comms that's going out to residents, we are very much cited as a place to go in and pop in and get help. But absolutely, you know, we would be happy to have conversations around if there's any further areas you are, yeah.
I'd just like to add as well that although this is a contract situation, it's very much a partnership. So my role is to make sure that both GLL and Explore really understand the council's vision and strategic direction. So we invite colleagues to some of those meetings where we're talking about the development of community hubs across the city, and absolutely challenging whether every library should be part of that, or whether actually it's an even more local community venue. So we are absolutely talking about that agenda. But thank you for raising it.
I mean, I'd like to follow up on that, because in some ways it's sometimes we all know quite difficult to get a good contact point at these offices, what with one thing and another, contact with officers. And I wondered, because I've had questions about the government's money that's being channeled through councils. And sometimes it might be easier if I could say to a person, pop into your local library and they will sort something out for you, and they know how to do it, and they will get it sorted for you. Because people will ring you who say, well, we don't have any digital, I'm not online, I haven't got this, I haven't got that. The library would be such a simple place, and that would be okay. That would be fine.
That is absolutely what we have been doing with residents and how we've been supporting residents. Yes, yes.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Any other questions before I move on? Councillor Fitzpatrick?
On that point, to do with access to PCs, etc., I see the mention of that. Certainly, again, I go back to Hungate and I'm thinking about the Warmgate community. The Wi-Fi access is good. That makes a difference for people who bring in their own. But just occasionally, there are people within because Hungate represents not just the Hungate estate, but it is Warmgate too. There are some people who would benefit from access to a machine, maybe. I mean, maybe through some, well, I'm always reluctant to say ward funding, but possibly, or through Red Tower itself, we could finance something to help people get online. We have big issue with digital parking, which is another thing people need to be online for, and in and around Navigation Road in that area. If they haven't got access to any online facilities, it would be good in Hungate. And just lastly on that, I suppose hours of opening and things like that. I know the local community on Hungate wanted to use the centre there in an evening for a community event. We've established that they were under the impression, or led to believe, that Section 106 money from Hungate for the provision of the cafe there would mean that as the community of Hungate that they could use that. Clearly, you know, you have to run a kind of a business model as well. So obviously there's a charge for that sort of thing in there. I think they accept that now, and they can, Hiscock and the other hotel there, the Moxie, offer free facilities for them. So, but yeah, so just digital access would be useful for parts of the community that haven't got that.
Can I just pick up that? Thank you. We've had problems with the Wi-Fi reliability at Hungate since we opened. So what we're trying to do is to improve that and talk to the people who use our service to see what it is that people want, and whether it's access to tablets to get our offer online, which is things like the press reader through the newspapers, or whether it's physical newspapers, things like that, as to what people want. And we are constantly talking to people about the opening hours. You'll be aware that our cafe manager has left, so we've had a change of staff there, and we've got a new offer there as a seasonal new menu for the summer. So we are looking at things, but what I don't want to do is to put digital offer in there and then it not be reliable for residents. So it's about getting that reliability first, and then we would happily look at that. As for the community offer on an evening, what we've tried to do is to have a a fair and stable offer. So if a community group is using it for a meeting in an evening, they have the access to that for free, and we leave them access to tea, coffee and things just for £1 a person to recover the cost of that. But they are able to have their meetings free of charge. They have the key safe code and the alarm codes, and they can use that. What we've said is if there's a fundraising event, that we would happily partner with them and provide catering. But if it's to generate income, then we would have a nominal charge of £50 for an evening, just so that we cover the cost of the extra cleaning, rubbish removal, alarm fees and things like that. And that's sort of just on a fair basis of any organisation that we're doing, just to make sure that we're not out of pocket, because what we don't want to do at Hungate is to take away from the rest of the service. So that's what we're doing. So hopefully that helps. But thank you for your support there. It is appreciated.
I'll just say that Lisa will be sadly missed from the Hungate Cafe.
She is, and we wish her well, because she's developed her skills since she started with us at Town Hall. She then grew to be a manager there, but actually that's what Explore's about. It's about developing people and giving them the tools. She always had a dream to open a cafe of her own, and her and her partner have opened, or about to open, one on which one is it? Coppergate. And we wish her well with that. But we have a really good dedicated team of within the cafes, and the service will be just as good with Sophia there. And I was there today, and it was busy and it was lovely. And the Red Tower were there on Monday, and it was really busy and active, which is lovely. So thank you.
Lovely, Susan. Thank you for that. Can I now turn to Paul and ask him to present his report to us? Thank you very much.
Evening, everyone. To start off, I just want to explain who GLL are. Greenwich Leisure Limited is obviously was based in London, is now expanded throughout the country. It's a non-for-profit charitable social enterprise. Any profits we make goes back into the business. Like Explore, during the pandemic, we obviously couldn't operate, and we were one of the last services to restart one, as we call it. We developed again the Better app, which allowed people to have free exercise on libraries and exercise throughout the whole pandemic. Last year, we were happy to have over 600,000 people come through our doors, which is quite significant, as much as we've had that stop starting all the time. And we've now approached about 90 to 95% of back to normal, which is really good for us. The one problem we've had is we cannot compare year on year, because obviously during the pandemic, we opened up Burnholme Sports Centre, which opened for 3 months and then closed because of the pandemic. And then obviously we opened the stadium, started. We managed to, with stadium, open it up in December. We then obviously started using it for behind closed doors matches. And then we also had the sports hall then used as a testing venue, which is really good. So Burnholme, working closely with Explore on the same footprint, it's done really, really well considering they're open just for 3 months. We've developed it now into more of a community health hub, where we're now getting working with the hospital to bring in outpatients into it, which is really, really beneficial, because they're there then for 12 weeks. We work closely with the physios, and then they're coming onto the HealthWise scheme, which is really beneficial, which then hopefully stops or slows down the amount of people going back into the health system. And now we're looking at improving that. When it comes to Energize, again, during COVID, it remained open at some points because the school came back. So obviously we're part of a dual use centre, so we're with the PE department there and the autism hub. So again, we opened that. And we work closely with the school through the school liaison committee with local councillors and such like. Energize as well, for example, it's been my little baby for a long time. I was manager there for quite a few years. And it's been really nice to see that we're putting in back investment. We put £85,000 in there last year into a new reception system. This year, we're putting in some more money into LED lighting. So trying to make it as efficient as we possibly can. Yearsley Pool was once I left there, I became a manager of a Yearsey Pool, and it's been a real pleasure to be there. Part of the Gll contract was that we could review the opening hours, and we wanted to protect it. What we've managed to do is secure that all the swimming clubs coming in at peak time on an evening between 5:30 and 8:30, Monday to Friday. And that's worked really, really well. They're really happy, even to the point where actually now they're sharing pools with other swimming clubs, which is unheard of. We've invested obviously heavily into that centre with LED lighting, and I'm pleased to announce next week we are putting in pool covers, which is going to save us over £36,000 a year on gas. So it's just huge, and obviously we're going to shut for a day. It's going to be a big job, but it's going to go in. Again, working with the action group there, they're really happy with the investment that continues to go into that centre. I'd like to talk about York Leisure Centre and the stadium as separate, because they are two separate entities, even though they're under one complex. The Leisure Centre is open quite successfully and is doing really well on memberships, engaging with the NHS through their outpatients departments with the two clubs and on all the other tenants, including Explore. Business has slowly crept up, and we're doing really well out there. We've opened the play park now in the outdoor areas. Probably the biggest thing that's happened to GLL is opening the stadium. We've never opened a football stadium before. I've never opened a football stadium, and it's been a huge learning curve. We obviously employed the York SMC, the stadium management company, on behalf through the York City Football Club. And we've continued. It was a rocky start, I must admit. That's in the report. But we have now got to a stage now where we're at high capacity. We had Leeds United playing last week, 7,700. We're getting some big crowds in there now. And it proves that the stadium is attracting local and now national and international prestige, which is really, really beneficial to the city, I believe. Just quickly want to talk about our Healthwise scheme, a bit of an unknown really, that we have a dedicated Healthwise manager and the team that are dedicated to exercise referral. This is where people are referred through the GP or the physio departments into our scheme, and it's working really well, including the weight management program. In fact, another good story. We actually had an email into one of our staff, Kelly at Energize, saying that through the weight management program, we potentially have saved her life because she's lost so much weight. And it's like, wow, that's amazing. So the Healthwise continues with working with physio departments, York Against Cancer and other areas, and York Coronary Care Group. It's doing really, really well. And then we've also got a dedicated community sports manager who's just started in March, and she's doing great work at dealing with North Yorkshire Sport and the new physical activity plan that we've incorporated into our health plan. And now we're rolling out on a daily basis. So I'm happy to take any comments or questions. I'm sure there'll be a few.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you. Councillor Orrell.
Put it on and it went off. All the threats Yearsley's had over the years, so that's great to hear. As you know, Paul, we had ward councillors had numerous meetings planning in the lead up to opening of the stadium, where we envisaged that public transport would play the major part in getting people to the stadium, and sadly COVID kiboshed that severely. There were problems initially with the stadium, with the bus companies. How are they managing now? What's the current situation with the recent matches?
We're working really closely with First York, with the football club, the rugby club, and the SMC. We're now getting some really good trends. We know how many buses to order for the capacity. Even when we get like 6 days notice when there's playoffs, First have done really well and gone to the crowd. We've also worked really closely with Vanguard about car parking as well, and they've got a really good relationship. And even when we've had the big matches, myself and Andy and a few other officers actually been around making sure that the streets around the local area are clear, and the enforcement team are out there doing what they should be doing.
I think we were following each other around.
So No, it's working really well. There's still work to do,
Mhm.
you know, and we are crunching the data. But the first have now got all the fixtures for the entire year, working already on different type of how many buses we're needing and what type of crowd we're going to get. Again, it's different with the football crowd and the rugby crowd.
Yeah.
Rugby mitts, and some football teams can't.
It was mentioned at some of our meetings that there may be buses from different parts of the city, Haxby or Poppleton or whatever. Is that still in the pipeline if possible?
We're reviewing it. Obviously, within the planning, there was also an option of parking and riding from Grimsby Bar.
Yeah.
The way it worked with Leeds United, that would have been worked really well, but with kickoff being at 7 o'clock, it seemed that everyone just drove from Leeds and parked locally. And I don't think they would have gone to park and ride and got bussed
No.
across at that time. However, we've also got the Women's World Cup coming up.
Yeah.
And through them, we'll be able to get the numbers through, and we'll hopefully 6,000 to 8,000 coming through. We'll be able to kind of planning it a bit better.
I think we also need to publicise that Vanguard is available in the evenings. A lot of people don't realise that.
Yeah, after 6 o'clock it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Anyway, thanks for all that's been happening. It does help our local residents.
thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Fitzpatrick.
Yes, thank you for the report. It reads very well. And yes, I agree with everything that Councillor Orrell has said. I would just say though that it's slightly further, obviously, for city centre young people and whatever to go to swim in terms of access to a pool. Historically, they might have had somewhere in the past, but I mean, it goes back quite a long time. But they can come out there, as you've said. It's north of the city in terms of York Leisure Centre. I'm talking now. It's north and beyond, so they can come out that far on that. So on Yearsley then, are we saying that, and I understand why if it's the answer, are you saying then that it's not open to the public at times, obviously when there are clubs going on, or
Yeah, that's correct.
yeah,
Yeah. So what we
okay.
have done is made sure we've got a balanced programme throughout the whole city. So if that pool's shut, there should be public swimming at Energize or at York Leisure Centre.
Okay,
So,
okay.
yeah.
Can I ask you on the stadium, particularly the links with the football club? I mean, obviously there have been changes there with the McGill family and in terms of the supporters now and the kind of takeover by them and whatever else. So that's working okay, is it?
Yeah, we've had an initial meeting with them a few weeks ago. We've got another meeting next week. It's a learning curve for everybody. It's not the football club stadium. It's not the night stadium. It's everyone's stadium, and everyone's got to share. And it's getting everyone to understand that they can't have a match before 7 o'clock because the NHS is still operating, can't work together. Car parking, transport, hospitality upstairs, but NHS have it till 5 o'clock. And then obviously hospitality takes over. So it's a big learning curve, but it's going well at the moment.
Good. Well, again, I mean, thank you for doing this. I mean, most people are thinking about this kind of area to go into, especially with energy prices so high and everything else. There were lots of challenges there, but you're obviously doing well. And I used to teach in the borough of Greenwich. So, I mean, knowing that you're from Greenwich originally, you know, all that area interests me too. Okay, well, thank you for what you're doing.
Councillor Luca.
Can I first put on record, I'll address it to Andy, I think, as he's the city council member. Can I just say, when I visited the stadium and all the ancillary activities that were proposed, I think I visited it when it was still a bit in lockdown. But can I just say, it so perfectly encapsulates the vision that we had as a Labour group when we envisaged the community stadium way back in 2017, I think. Took a long time to think through, but it's got everything I ever wanted. It got the swimming, it got the library, it got the health service partnerships, it got the sports and the community stadium being shared, though there were some very rocky rides getting there with the City Football Club and the City Knights. God, there was a partnership made in, I'm not sure heaven, but it was made somewhere. And it really has come off. I wanted to pick up on swimming, particularly because it is a peculiarly challenging time to be running a swimming function. There are obviously the rocketing costs of heating, and covers will help a bit, but there is still that you have to keep the pool moderately warm. And then there's the costs and the availability of chlorine. You don't talk about chlorine in your report. You've drawn a discreet veil over it. But I wondered if you'd like to just say what the challenges are at the moment and how you're meeting those.
Yeah, so regarding energy, we've obviously, majority of our centres now over the last couple of years, we've invested in LED, variable speed drives to try and reduce. We have turned down the temperature of the pools by a degree. It's huge savings. You know, whenever you go, hopefully if you go past a pool and it's closed, the covers are off, the lights are off, and everyone's shutting doors. They've been well drilled. Regards to chlorine, you'd have seen that obviously York's sports closed because they fell short of, and it's happened throughout the whole country. It has been closed, and obviously I did let Andy know that it was coming our way, and we've got down to the last barrel of chlorine at sometimes. But we've managed to get through, and I believe now the supply chain has picked up coming from America, and hopefully by end of August we're back to full strength. So, but with COVID, staffing issues, with utility prices and chlorine, it's been a nice ride.
But you are still going strong. Yeah, and your numbers are holding up.
Numbers are increasing.
That's good, because
yeah, obviously they've decreased at Yeasley Pool because we built the stadium, a few 2 miles away, but we're changing how Yeasley works, and it seems to be working really well.
I mean, I think in some ways it's quite a good idea to open it to clubs, because it is in some ways a very club-focused pool. I mean, I used to swim there at one point, and it is a long length if you're more used to the traditional.
Yeah,
lengths.
it's 45.7 meters,
so it's much, in some ways, it's much better for those dedicated lane swimmers who want to go plow up and down.
If you're
fast.
a hardcore triathlon, you go there, and majority of the clubs want to go there because it is what they call a long course. So instead of going to Leeds or Sunderland, so it's well liked.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Can I just add a further point?
Please do, Andy.
Councillor Looker has picked up on something really, which is a real challenge going forward, which is the cost of utilities. And it's for both our partners across the table. You know, we've agreed contract sums for the delivery of services, and then the utility prices have massively increased. And again, it's a partnership, so we are working very closely with GLL and our property team and our energy team to look at what we can do. And GLL have got some great national resources to support that as well. But it's not going to go away. So, watch this space. We will need to report back on the progress of the utility increases.
Right. Thank the four of you. You're very welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting if you wish. However, also, if you wish to get off and enjoy the rest of your evening, then you're very welcome to leave us. And thank you very much for your contributions this evening. Thank you. Right. My apologies to the committee, because in that eagerness to get started, I forgot to begin the item number 1. Can I ask if there were any declarations of interest from the committee members this evening? The items on the agenda. Thank you. In terms of the minutes for the 28th of June, any comments that people wish to make if they were present at that meeting? Nope. Thank you very much. In that case, I'll sign them at the end of the meeting. We have no public participation. Now, our next item 4, Jamila Hussain is joining us via Zoom. Can you hear me, Jamila?
I can. Thank you, Chair.
Lovely. Would you like to begin presenting your report for us? Thank you very much.
Okay, so this is the report that the committee has asked for around sickness. Is it the employee absence in children's services report? Is that the one, Chair?
That's the one. Yes, that's it. Thank you, Jamila.
Yeah, so this is the report that was asked for by the committee, and I'm not going to go through it in the whole context, but just to say the current position. We have 28 current absences at this time, 12 absent for less than a week. So we have actually just recently had a rise in number of social workers being off with COVID, not off for a long time or significantly unwell with COVID, but have been off, but not for a long period of time. And 5 absence that are between a week and a month. 10 absence being more than a month, and 1 absent for 3 months or more. Lots of those, as you can see, the reasons for them. 13 are pre-planned surgeries, and I think this is the after effects of COVID and people having their surgeries now. They're getting through the wait list. But 12 absence with stress. I just want to raise this. So there's very few that are off with work stress, and there's lots of staff coming back to us around personal stress and how that's affecting their ability to be able to work in the workplace. So I have been linking with Helen Whiting to say, how can we, obviously we have that statutory duty to support people who are off work because they're stressed with work-related challenges. However, the personal stress is something that's outside of that. But I am working with Helen to say, how can we use our resilience hub in a different way to support people who are finding it difficult around some personal stress and things going on at home or within family settings. So that's one thing I wanted to raise about the stress absence there. So in point 9, the graph just shows you the steadily increase of the average sickness days year to date. So they've steadily been rising. We were at our lowest sort of last July, August time, and they have slowly risen in April. What we didn't see was the same trend that you got through health services, where there was high sicknesses in June, July, and some parts of May last year. What we are seeing is more sickness now associated with various things, as I've explained earlier. And we have had some instability in children's services, as you know, around some changes of leadership. We are coming to a point of where that's been more settled. But however, I do have to stress that although employees feel they have been unsettled and there have been changes and turnover, but most were really positive about working with York. And they mentioned that to our Ofsted inspectors as well, that working with York they feel has been positive, and the support that they receive from us has been positive as well. And as you know, we've recruited a new corporate director for children's services, Martin, and a director of safeguarding, Danielle, who will be starting in August, and that will further give the team a bit more stability as we go along, as I'm the interim just overseeing it at this moment. But coming down to agency workers, because this is the area that the committee wanted us to look at. We have had a significant reduction in the agency workers in children's services recently. We are expecting us to move from having over 37 to about 16 by September. We have been able to recruit, and we've had a good recruitment campaign over the last few weeks. So we have 10 more social workers joining us on a contract basis rather than an agency. We still have agency staff, so we are working to as we can reduce that. But when we talk about agency staff, I just wanted to assure colleagues in the committee that we don't have agency staff where we have lots of movement and we have instability in the staff that we use, so children don't have consistency of worker. What we do have is agency staff that stay for a longer period of time, so there is that consistency with them, so it's not 6 weeks, 8 weeks of a social worker and the turnover that way. It's more that we have long-term agency, 12 months, 6 months, 12 months, even 18 months there. So just a reassurance is that the impact on the interaction with children and young people isn't affected by the number of agency staff, but equally we would like our staff to be permanent, because there's lots of other challenges around agency staff, as we all know. And the areas of focus going forward is to make sure that we have absence recorded on the system, because some of the absences when we looked on the system should have been closed down, and we're working with managers to make sure that we close absences in the right time, so the data that's coming out is right and doesn't show unnecessary trends when there aren't any. We have a clear absence policy, including the reasons and capturing for absences and supporting people back into work. So that's a real area of focus where we want to ensure that all employees are aware of the absence policy and the support we can give them as a council on their return, and that includes our managers who do in return to work. And then emphasis on point 19 is the emphasis on well-being, you know, whether the well-being of individuals is affected by home life or whether it's affected by work, making sure that employees feel supported and they can take that time out. Like I said, we are working with our resilience hub, and more people have been accessing the counselling and support services that are through the resilience hub, which is a positive thing, where we had lower intake before, but we see more people who have actually trying now to contact that service, which I think is a positive thing. We have a workforce development board in place. I think I mentioned this at one of our earlier committees, and that looks at making sure that we have the overall oversight of employee absence, where we've got employees leaving, how quickly do we then recruit, the retention and the employee development. This is a board that works across children and includes our HR colleagues, so we don't have any lag in agreeing adverts or agreeing for jobs to go out and recruitment to take place. But equally, we've got a whole programme in there around how do we support retention of the workers we've got. So that's work that is ongoing, and that board is in place. So just coming down to the recommendations, Chair, and the recommendation is for the committee to note the report and for us to keep the committee updated in relation to staff absence and in children's services. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Jamila. That's very helpful. I had two questions, but the first one you've answered it around stress. I was just asking about, I was going to ask about how you might have informal routes to support members of staff in what is a very challenging profession. I think you've answered that one for us very, very fully. The other question is a very basic one. Approximately how many members of staff do you have in children's services?
We have 380 staff.
Lovely, thank you very much. That kind of puts 12s and 13s in context, doesn't it? Thank you very much. See if anybody else wants. Councillor Fitzpatrick.
Firstly, thank you, Jamila, for this and for the very detailed report you gave and questioning session at the last meeting. I appreciate you coming into this post at this point in time. And, you know, I think on this committee that certainly my colleagues anyway are very appreciative of that. So thank you. And I'm sure supported by Maxine, although it's not Maxine's necessarily area, the school's link in there is helpful. So thank you to Maxine for holding the fort really, and alongside you until Martin and Danielle come into post. And I have to say, and I've mentioned before, I was involved in their interviews and appointment panel, and I think that we have got 2 very good people coming into post, so that's good. On that then, I'm pleased to see number 15, the Grow Your Own Frontline. We were pleased about that, and the change to grade 12 for experienced social workers, because it's not so much about recruitment, as we keep saying, it is about retention and keeping people. And I wonder how many, if we're saying now that we've got agency staff who are kind of long-term agency staff, do any of them ever decide, you know, oh, well, actually, I might decide to be permanently in York rather than remain agency? So looking at that, I'm not going to ask you now, Jermaine, about that, but I mean, that would be interesting to see if any of them choose to, you know, remain with us on that. I just want to ask a question about number 17, really, only because I don't know this, the system we're talking about there. And you go on elsewhere to talk about reasons for absence and the interviews when they come back, which is all very good. But that first bit there where it says they register their absence, the reason and expected date of return. Not all absentees will be able to give you an expected date of return, or might that be even stressful to ask that? Or how does that work, Jamila?
I think sometimes mainly on the sick or fit notes, they're called now, aren't they? The fit notes that are returned, they do have a date on there of an expected date of fitness. Some do, you're quite right, councillor. Some don't. A majority do have. And what we want to people to get in the habit of it is recording every time a fit note comes in the date of expected return to work. If it's on that fit note, that's where we can track and support our employees back into work. Not that we don't do it already. There is a policy of that. We keep in touch, and the manager keeps in touch with the employee quite often if the employee requests it. However, it's just making sure that we get our systems all updated, because some of the data, councillor, when I was looking at it, wasn't quite right. So we did have to go through it to make sure that it's recorded properly and the reasons are recorded properly on our digital system.
Thank you. I just really asked that, I suppose, because to get a sick note implies seeing a doctor, really. And we all know how difficult that is these days. People can't get in. It's in the press again today about how long it is for one particular medical centre, up to a month to get an appointment. So to get a medical certificate is actually quite difficult. But thank you, Jamila.
No, thank you for your kind words, councillor.
Any other questions for Jamila? Councillor Luca.
Thank you very much, Jamila, and I appreciate this is probably almost your farewell performance for children's services, and we're welcoming you back to adults with open arms. But can I just focus on children in care who have a dedicated social worker? How much of an impact is this having on them? Because there are real concerns, I know, from a number of children, and they are at the end of it. That's the heart of this service. It's the children we are caring about particularly. And sometimes they find it very difficult to cope if they have too many changes of social worker, with some children allegedly reporting that they've had 2 or 3, perhaps 4 social workers over a period of time. And this causes great lack of continuity. And I wonder how much you can do when you're managing sickness to ensure that children in care do get a social worker who is going to stay the course as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, a really good question, councillor Lucan. And I think especially in the children in care team, much more of a stable team, councillor Lucan, where the social workers do work quite closely. There's almost 2 social workers attached to a child, so there is that continuity. So when somebody's off sick, there is another social worker that is very familiar with the case, including the team manager. This is an area where we do have agency workers as well. They are longer term, so we don't have so much change and churn. And the whole programme we've got around retention, as Councillor Fitzpatrick talked about, moving to that grade 12 and the over recruitment will further help. But what we do try to do in all circumstances has reduced the number of changes of social workers, children in need in care get in particular, and that crossover working with two social workers is helping at the moment, I think.
Thank you, and let's hope your retention, Councillor Fitzpatrick is right, retention is the key.
Thank you, Jemima. I don't think we have any further questions. So can I thank you for the report, especially as we asked for it at fairly short notice, and wish you good evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Right. That brings us now to item 6 on the agenda, which is the York Learning Strategic Plan. Angie and Paul. Now, who's going to start? Angie? Fine. You have the floor.
Hi, so thank you very much. Sorry for disrupting things a little bit at the beginning. My laptop decided to fail on me when I decided not to print everything out. Anyway, so yes, this is our report of the year. So on Annex A, there's a strategic plan with all our key performance notes. What we come to you for is for you to look at how we performed, ask us about what we've done, whether you want us to clarify anything and that sort of thing, so that we have more robust governance. Our significant highlights on page 56 is we've performed well against those measures. We have improved some of our funding for 16 to 18 learners with special educational needs, although we're still overperforming on that funding, unfortunately, so we need some more. And we are hitting targets in general. We have done some work this year to concentrate, sort of over the last 18 months, to concentrate on building up partnership with community groups in a much wider sense. So we're trying to develop our programs to be more ground up rather than bottom up, which is part of the LEP report, which they did on community learning and adult skills in relation to the combined authority. So we've done a lot of in-depth sort of bespoke courses with different organisations. And I've sort of given an example there of some of the ones that we've done. And in Annex B, I've given a list of all the partners that we've actually worked with over the last year and a half, building up those relationships. So for example, we've created bespoke IT courses at the Travellers Trust. The learners came along for an IT course. They got a laptop from IT Reuse, and at the end of the course, they could take the laptop away from them. And that was the most attended course that Travellers Trust had, apparently. So things like that are where we're going. We're doing a millinery course with Merton Museum, because that's one of the few places that millinery is still working and happening at. And we've been working with the psychosis prevention service with the NHS and putting some art and craft courses on for them to support their clients. And again, with my site, we've put specific course together developed by them to access what sort of apps would help their clients be able to access technology, what would support them, what can talk to them through what the screen's saying, and so on. So we developed that with them hand in hand. As part of this report, you asked me to focus on 2 key areas. So one was digital inclusion, which I put at number 7. And the other was COVID recovery, which is at point 8. I think our digital inclusion has actually gone really well this year. We're managing well after COVID. Digital skills was really hit during the COVID period. People with low digital skills don't want to learn digital skills online through Zoom. They want to do it face to face. They want to come to a classroom. So finally in September, we could properly return, and that has seen a significant increase in numbers. Post-COVID recovery, we've had challenges. Because we haven't had as much recruitment through COVID at the entry level, lower level skills, because we haven't been able to do that face-to-face recruitment. That means it's affecting, we haven't got the progression routes still coming through now. And that's going to probably take another year to be back into those skills areas. So those numbers aren't necessarily where we'd like them to be, but they are improving. But that's because we haven't had those pathways. So if we can't do the recruitment at the lower end, they're not doing the entry level qualifications. They therefore can't sign up for the level 1 the following year, and they can't sign up for the level 2. And we can't get them there without that engagement at the bottom level. And that's probably our biggest challenge from post-COVID recovery, really. And within the strategic plan, you'll see at point, I think it's 2.1. So you've got all the key performance points in that. But at key point 1, where I've gone on to the specific sort of priority areas, you'll see that we were having a shared joint head with North Yorkshire as part of preparing for devolution combined authority, and that's Paul here, who I'd like to introduce to you. So Paul Cliff is our new person working, new I say, but he's been here since September, but new to you at Scrutiny. And I'm sure he'd like to give you some information on the strategy that you've introduced, Paul.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for the invitation to come along this evening. It's great where York were. I mean, obviously, I share 2 positions across York and North Yorkshire. And in terms of where the direction of travel of funding for adult learning was going and the positions that adult learning across the country is in relation to the direction of travel towards skills agenda, towards clear direction from start to finish in terms of individual and personal progression. That bottom-up approach that Angie has talked about was already in place and starting to embed. So to come in and then put forward a strategy that enables us to move forward into that agenda with some confidence has been really positive. I think our greater challenge in York is that Angie runs a very, very tight ship. And in terms of where we need to get to, it will mean that some of the things that we've traditionally been able to offer may have to change in terms of the dynamic and in terms of change in terms of the access to free us up the opportunity as we move forward into potential devolved funding, where we're able to support lots more aspects of community learning. So community learning in particular is a potential big battleground when it comes to a devolved authority and in terms of the amount of funding that's available. And certainly local partners, when they've gone into devolution, it's been community learning that's been the area that has suffered the most. And certainly what we have tried to do with the strategy is to show that how we can develop effective collaborative partnerships, not just with community and voluntary sector, which will be vital, but also with other providers of learning to show a seamless progression, because we want to get to the position where probably over the next 3 years is the key period where we need to be able to demonstrate that we can all work well together, so that when a mayoral combined authority comes in and is dishing the money out, they don't reinvent the wheel. If it's working, why break it? Why fix it? So that's the model that we're sort of looking to develop and move forward with. What we are challenged with is starting to work with different demographics than the ones that we currently work with. Our demographic, in terms of the people we engage with, aren't necessarily the demographic that we need to engage with to stimulate the economy, to provide the pipeline that's needed. We aren't successful in, for instance, in working with individuals aged 19 to 25, which is a largely a greater inactive group amongst all the demographics. So we need to create and change our offer in order to be able to do that. So what we're keen to do with the strategy is to take learning to the places that people come together, rather than them having to come to us, rather than us have to, you know, particularly say this particular institution or this particular place is the way to go. If people are coming together within a community in whatever form that can be, those examples that Angie showed can demonstrate that we can go to those communities and identify the types of learning that are available and enable that to have some seamless progression into and through our courses, and use us very much as the gateway to the skills agenda. And that's sort of the way that we've aligned where we are. So that's probably enough of me rambling at this point, to give people the opportunity to ask any questions that they may have. Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you.
One question.
Gone off again. Sorry. Thank you for the very comprehensive report, Angie, and reminds me just how much you do across how many areas of ambition and so on. One of those is, of course, to have your own base. Now, I just wonder whether that's a very challenging thing. You're working with the head of property services to try and find somewhere. But have you thought of working with a partner organization in the sense of partnering with someone to share premises? Because there must be a lot of spaces in the city where actually the space they have is underused.
I would love to find somewhere. We have struggled to find anywhere with premises. Really, truly, the premise, what we want is for adults to identify with a place which is for them to improve their education and to have opportunities for families to be learning together as well as part of family learning. To have a place like that requires a particular setup, and we need sort of ownership of that place, really, so that the scheduling is all fitted around the type of learning we do. So this is no criticism against Burnham, but for example, we have counselling at Burnham Library. Sometimes Town Hall Smart have instruments playing in the middle of some group work of counselling when someone's telling a really emotional story, or the radio pops up, and that's only one example. I have multitude of ones that happen in the schools that we're in and so on. What we really need is a base where we can control what else is going on in the building and work with partners that complement us and understand what we're all trying to do. I'd love to be in a place that works with other partners, because I think that would really support us. I would love to be in York Central. Working hard to try and get somewhere in York Central, but unfortunately the council itself doesn't have property there. But I'm working with Yoko Community Group and all about what their agenda is with learning and how we might be able to support that if we were there. But also, you know, there are other opportunities coming up. I think for us, we do sometimes get complaints from learners because they don't want to travel from Acomb to get to Huntington School for a course, and they don't want to travel, you know, all the way over to Fulford or up to York High. If we were centrally based, then everybody can get to us. And if we're going to target those most in need, if I put a class in some of the areas, I'm just not going to get enough learners to make that cover its cost. Whereas if I'm in central, I can pull from different areas for key groups, and then it can wash its face, it can cover those costs. And that's why, for me, it's really important that we're somewhere central.
Lovely, thank you. That's very clear. Councillor Fitzpatrick.
Many comments, really. Can I say, Angie, thank you for all of that. And certainly in relation to number 5, I think, yeah, anything to do with 16 to 24 special educational needs SEND is very challenging, really, to meet that. So I can understand why you're saying there that about you know, not about those targets being difficult and challenges there with budgets on that front. So that is going to be an ongoing thing, isn't it, really, to continue to look at that. But I would also like to say well done on some of those examples there that you've mentioned under number 6 as well. I'm particularly pleased about the Travellers Trust. I used to be a trustee there, so anything to do with encouraging travellers to be more involved or to give them opportunities, greater opportunities, that's good. And young carers, really, too. So that is good there. So well done on that. And just to comment to Paul, really, I suppose it was just, I think, you know, everything you've described is good. I suppose I was just surprised with your mention of mayoral and combined authorities and things like that. Although, you know, there probably is an inevitability about it. It's still quite a hot topic, really, for us, you know. So the word when really is interesting. But okay, what you've described is good, so thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Orrell.
It stayed on this time. Thank you for the report. The service is described as funded with external contracts and grants. How robust is that?
So at the moment, there's the grants that we get within adult education budget, which is robust. As long as we hit 97% of our funding being spent. If we don't hit 97% of that funding being spent, there's clawback of that. So and the funding basically is triggered per learner, per a 6-week pattern that they're in learning. And then there's another part of the funding that's paid on completion and achievement. So it's never 100% robust because you can't quantify exactly how many are going to achieve. You can aim for the best results, but most of our learners have challenging lives. They have lots of things going on. They change jobs, which means they change shifts and they change all sorts of things like that. And as flexible as we are, sometimes it's too much pressure to continue with learning. So we can't always have that 100% achievement that we would like. Most people can't achieve 100% achievement, certainly not in adult and community education. The ESF funding that we have for our projects, that finishes next year. And then there's a gap before UK shared prosperity funding kicks in 24. But there's potential for some of it to be covered by the UK shared prosperity funding emergency fund or something. But some of those projects may not. Positive progressions, for example, may not be able to continue for that year. And then it will be whether they're seen as the worthy projects moving forward. Those projects work with, one of them is the Ministry of Justice, which we work with people on probation, getting them back into the community, doing commuter learning programs. And the other two, one is Action Towards Inclusion, which works with those furthest away from the workplace, maybe with health conditions that is stopping them. It's a lot of in-depth coaching and mentoring to get them to recognise what they can do and build up their confidence, and then get them slowly back into skills to look at job opportunities, apply for them and be successful at that. And positive progressions is very similar, but just a slightly different cohort. So that's a risk there with our funding.
Yes, thank you. It sounds very complicated. And I've always thought being dependent on these funds that come and go doesn't help progress services, not just your service in general.
Thank you, Angie.
And adult education, I've always said, has to be an absolute fundamental. If you're going to increase people's well-being, if you're going to increase people's, and you mention it somewhere, I think, around people's transferable skills. If you've got, if you're going to need to retrain or re-equip yourself to a new skill, adult learning is where you should be doing it. And the fact that its funding is so precarious, and always has been as far as I know, is singularly depressing. Perhaps one day we should get a government that recognises the importance. Can I just ask a question? I was a bit confused about, you mentioned some of the basic computer learning, is it the European Computer Driving License, which I always thought was a wonderful title. You're not going to be able to get funding to deliver that. Is that right?
That's correct. So there's been a qualification review. I don't know if you're aware of it, over the last year for level 1 funding, and then level 2, and I believe level 3. So it's affected BTEC and stuff like that. So within digital skills, it's been decided to only fund entry and level 1 essential digital skills qualification. And the ECDL fits within level 1, level 2.
Yes.
But they've decided not to fund them from August. That's a huge employability impact for us, because we use ECDL, ICDL, European Computer Driving License, International Computer Driver License. So now we're not in the EU, it's called ICDL. That qualification has massive impact on people that are unemployed, or mothers getting ready to return back to employment, to build up their IT skills, to practice them, to really get to know them and feel comfortable with them, to then apply for jobs and feel that they can actually do them and not be scared by the technology by it.
I absolutely agree, and was recognised by employers as a significant qualification. If you could say you'd got that, it gave you a tick on certain basic that you weren't totally computer illiterate. And I mean, heavens, but we used to offer it, didn't we? As an authority, I remember quite a lot of us councillors went and had a go. But I think it is. You're quite right. It's very retrograde, and it's going to put some people at very significant.
I would just like to reassure you that I'm not stopping there, though. I met with the DFE last week with a HOLEX representative from adult education to talk to them about the problems with the essential digital skills. It's not correctly, the language isn't at the correct levels within the exam, so learners get confused. And about the fact that actually if they reclassified the ECDL as an employability qualification rather than within the category they've got it, it would then probably be funded. So I'm hoping I've given them a way out to reintroduce it, hopefully.
Chair, did I mishear? Did it used to be EU funding? Is that what you said? Did it used to be EU funding? No.
And it received funding itself to each level.
We don't need to bring Brexit into this one. I don't think it.
Councillor Fitzpatrick.
I just remembered, in fact, listening to you talking there about something in the Guildhall Ward that I was lucky enough to be asked to sort of open with Rachel Maskell, our MP, and that was something that was funded by the probation service, and it was it was largely for women, in fact, but but the people that were there, it was absolutely excellent. It was a lifesaver to them, and to be able to continue with education and get back into employability was excellent. But I do know that, as you say, that all these things hinge on funding, really, and that can disappear just as easily. But I thought that was very good.
Thank you. Any further questions for Angie and Paul? Right, thank you. Thank you for the report, and very comprehensive as usual, Angie. Thank you. And you wish to leave now, it's fine, and you're very welcome. That's fine. Right, can I now turn to item 5 on the agenda, the York Skills and Employment Board update. Maxine, I think you're probably here to talk to that with Councillor Waller.
Yes.
Any further questions to join in with?
Yeah. Unfortunately, our skills team manager, Alison Edison, is unwell this evening, so she's sent her apologies. The reports that you have in front of you provides an update on the work of the York Skills and Employment Board, which has actually been in existence since September 2020. It continues to be chaired by Lee Probert, the principal and chief executive of York College. The work of the board during COVID very much looked at the skills agenda in terms of what short-term actions could be taken to support the workforce as a result of the needs of COVID recovery, but they very quickly went into a broader skills strategy which looks at an ambitious 10-year plan around the way that the partnership will work together to develop skills as part of a broader skills and economic strategy in the city. What I would stress as well about the development of the 10-year skills strategy and also the work of the board is that this is very much a partnership piece of work. So it's not led by City of York Council. City of York Council is involved through the work of officers in the skills team who have been supporting various partners who make up the board, but also the council is represented on the board through myself and through Councillor Waller. But we are part of a broader skills partnership, and that's entirely appropriate if we're going to achieve the aims of the strategy. The board is now working on the implementation and delivery of the 10-year skills strategy. So it's moved into the phase of implementation and delivery. It's the focus of the 4 commitment groups that are described in paragraph 22. And they link very, very closely to the ambitions that are outlined in the strategy itself. The commitments are that York works for individuals, that it empowers employers, that it's pioneering provision, and that the area that my work in education and skills is most closely linked to is around York's talent pipeline. Recently, the board met on the 24th of June and started to think about who wasn't represented around the current employment and skills board table, and it has taken a decision to invite a representative from the secondary heads group, linked again to commitment 4 around the talent pipeline, to be actively involved in the work of the board. The work also involves a range of partners, including York Learning. So there is a link to the previous item. It is also linked very closely to the work that goes on within City of York Council that's led by the Economic Development team, and Alison's team in skills works very closely and in partnership with the Economic Development team. We're also as well obviously keeping a close eye on the way that the skills agenda is developing nationally and internationally, and particularly through the devolved authority. Starting to look at the opportunities that devolved skills will bring to North Yorkshire and to York. And the work of the Skills and Employment Board has, from its outset, really positioned itself around not just what is happening currently, but also thinking about how it can use its influence, particularly through the FE and HE partners, to really draw down and influence national strategy. So that's something that it's very much sighted on and beginning to think about. The report gives you some areas of ongoing work which is taking place to support that implementation and delivery plan, and specifically highlights the work that's taken place across the partnership, but also the work done by the City of York Council skills team, and in particular the way that skills team works with schools in particular, supports the apprenticeship agenda within City of York Council, and also works across the careers information and advice network in the city, and continues to provide the impartial York Apprenticeship Hub. So I'll leave it there and invite Councillor Waller to add any comments, and then open for questions.
Thank you, Maxine.
Thank you, Chair. As Maxine has mentioned, initially it was drawn together as an emergency to ensure that young people still had access to the training, the work experience that is required when completing job applications, as well as anticipated retraining of people who had lost their jobs, and ensuring that initially there was full awareness of existing schemes that could absorb more people, and then with the 10-year plan to look further ahead, recognising the increased automation, the increased use of IT and high tech in a wide range of industries, particularly rail, looking at that. The STEM agenda, getting more young people to think aspirationally, and to have more women in STEM, which has been, particularly in the rail tech industry, a relative success, but there's still a long way to go before it's 50-50. So it's taking that step ahead. The 10-year plan does look specifically at York. It was there had been a discussion about whether we should wait for North Yorkshire to catch up, but the nimbleness of a closely connected city to be able to take those decisions about its economy was felt to be the most appropriate way to respond to the pressures. I also sit on the West Yorkshire Combined Authority Economy and Skills Committee and see what they're doing. And there are many similarities in, sorry to bring up Brexit, but we've got to ensure that the EU funds that we were familiar with receiving, that had kept a lot of courses running that we expected, to make sure that whatever scheme is developed by central government for equivalence actually does ensure those courses that we need to continue to be funded, and further ones in anticipation of new technologies to be available. So that is a crucial aspect, and certainly one that any devolved deal, whatever shape it comes in, whether it's mayoral or not mayoral, it would need to address. So if Alison were here, she would be too shy to mention what a fantastic job she has done increasing the number of apprenticeships in the council, but also ensuring that there's resources from the levy going to other businesses that we can pass it on to, and really upping the game in the number and availability of apprenticeships, recognising that they cover a wide range of age groups and qualifications. So much more is being spent on before, and my own role within the board is to ensure inclusion, that all communities in the city are considered in decision making, and given my own ward, and I recognise that Councillor Fitzpatrick was mentioned her own ward previously in this meeting, that it's about making sure that all parts of the city benefit from the success of the economy. But as Maxine mentioned, it is a partnership. It is chaired by Lee Probart, and therefore it's not exclusively a council organisation, but we are here to ensure that there's engagement with all parts of the council, and it has been through scrutiny a number of times to ensure that views of a wider range of councillors is involved. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fitzpatrick.
Yes, I've got a few things I'd just like to comment on, really, but well done is what I'd like to say. I think you know, your explanation there, Councillor Waller and Maxine, and going through it is obviously something we want to support. I would say just a couple of things really on these women and STEM industries. We have got some very good examples in the higher education sector in York of women who were involved. For example, Professor Sarah Thompson in physics at York University, who goes out to schools and talks and things like that to try and encourage women to think about things like that. So she might be somebody, you know, that probably others, but I know she's on the national stage for her work in physics and for work with it, getting women to become more involved. So as somebody to think about, I was wondering, looking at number 45 here about the groups you're working with and people, is there any opportunity there not to be an equal partner, but to involve somehow, like the youth council or groups like that, in terms of their ideas, to tell them what you're doing, what your plans are, whatever, to see, because sometimes they come up with some very creative ideas. And, you know, what would, for example, you could ask them, what would you be saying to people younger than yourselves to try and encourage them to get involved in things like this? And then lastly, green jobs. One of your colleagues on the other side over there in the housing scrutiny meeting the other evening talked a lot about apprenticeships and offering things within the green economy there, and particularly, you know, more electricians, more whatever, and he claimed to know lots of people who would do this. But generally speaking, green jobs and the green economy is an area to work on for apprenticeships, certainly. So yeah, lots of food for thought here actually, and quite impressive.
Thank you. Councillor Look.
It's very similar to a group I sat on back in, God, the early 2000s, which seemed to have very much the same agenda. I can't remember what it was called, but we certainly met up at York College pre-Lee Probert. It was under the previous principal, whose name I forget. I've also met demands from government that we transform the curriculum to increasingly meet the needs of businesses. That was being pursued in the late 1980s. I remember discussing it significantly at North Yorkshire County Council. I voiced my concerns then. I continue to voice my concerns. Businesses have a role, but at the end of the day, they don't always seem to know what they want. Increasingly, they tend to go back to what they learned at school. And as we all know, what we learned at school is at least 20 years out of date by the time we come to being employers. So I take that with a total pinch of salt. It didn't work in the late 80s, and I'm not sure it's going to work in the 2020s. But I may be wrong. I always stand to be corrected. Two things struck me very much around some of the opportunities for work and apprenticeships. I have been particularly struck by the work the Minster is doing to develop heritage stonemasonry. Quite frankly, York has such a wealth of heritage, and it's not just stonemasonry, it's the glass, medieval glass. We also have a wonderful railway museum, which is very good at teaching people how to mend steam engines. Now, these are skills, I call them heritage skills, but I think they are internationally important. There are, God, how many cathedrals are there scattered across Europe? Not many city walls, we've got one of the few, but quite a number. And I really do think we ought to almost be picking up some of that. And it's probably caught up in some of your bits, but I really do think heritage apprenticeships, heritage skills, and yes, I know you want to speak, but let me finish. And the final one I want to mention is not heritage at all, but is up to date. Span up to date. I feel we could have mentioned that we are a UNESCO city of digital arts, because quite frankly, you do mention digital, you mention the creative skills and the cultural heritage. They're hugely important for this city, just as important as STEM. And I think I would have liked to have seen a reference, just passing as a city of UNESCO status. Surely we ought to be developing, and there are significant opportunities in the digital arts area to create and to nurture people who want to start their own businesses, because it's very much a startup trade. So those were just 3, or was it 4, comments I wanted to make, and I will now pass my microphone over to Councillor Waller.
Councillor Waller, you have the microphone.
Thank you. I think the heritage aspect of this is what distinguishes it from the strategy that any city might have developed, because of the uniqueness of the situation in York to have so many different heritage skills centres and skills being passed down, and recognizing that those are adapting. The benefit at the Centre of Excellence that the Minster is proposing is that it utilises modern technology to do those laborious bits of turning stone, to enable more time to be spent on specific elements. I was minded, I met with the sculptor who was doing the statue of the Queen, and he'd spent a fortnight on one ear, which, if you're having to chip away all of the stone, is not necessarily something that you would have. In terms of encouraging women into science, I think that is a more developed aspect than women into engineering, which I think that there is still a challenge. It was useful to go to York College and see the building apprentices, and there were women there. and very keen to utilise green skills. And I think that's something that is coming through. And in terms of the digital arts, this is specifically mentioned as a strength in the city, and something that it has an increased amount of jobs connected with it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fitzpatrick.
I just want to say to councillor or ask, what about the idea of youth council or something being consulted or presented to or whatever, because they'll have younger siblings, won't they? A lot of them.
Yeah, at the last meeting of the board, there was a discussion about access to youth voice and young people, and there also are plans as part of the implementation and delivery phase. The universities are also thinking about things like enterprise workshops which will be directly young person facing. So those plans are already being taken forward.
Yeah, I think on that point, in the rail skills discussion, it was very much, not only do you have to, talking to businesses, not only do you have to activate the imagination of 13-year-olds, actually getting 8-year-olds to think about. And therefore, it really is getting a separate mindset and taking on board some of the comments about how businesses look forward to the future. I think there's a recognition that there are thousands of people needed to fill gaps just in the rail sector. So that does require maximising the number of young people thinking about it as a potential career.
And we used to have green apples. Do we still have green apples that encouraged primary school children to pay a visit to a university for a few days?
Yes, as part of their work on access and participation, the universities have actually been developing their programmes. So we have got some legacy programmes like Green Apples, but they're also looking at broadening their approach, and there is work taking place between the University of York and the Westfield community, which will develop an outreach hub based around access and participation. So some really innovative and creative work taking place at the moment from the outreach work of both universities.
Thank you. Any other questions from any members? In that case, Maxine and Councillor Waller, thank you both very much for presenting the report, which is very useful. I think in terms of the future, it would be useful for us to have a report on the implementation and progress, maybe once a year or so. But
yeah, that's one of the things, obviously, that we were wanting to clarify in terms of the relationship of scrutiny to the future implementation of the 10-year skills strategy. So that's very helpful, Chair, that you would like an annual report.
I'm sure we'll welcome it.
Yeah.
Thank you both. Just moving on to the last part of the agenda now, very briefly, because I don't think I need to hold you up, because you've already gone through this particular work plan in some detail. Just to say that on the 28th of July, Councillor Webb and I are meeting with officers to decide how to prioritise those aspects we come up with as high, medium and low priority throughout the year. So that's basically to fit in with officers' abilities to provide us with reports and updates and so forth that we need. So that's going to happen on the 28th of July, and I think that's all I need to say for this evening. Yes, Councillor Fitzpatrick, please.
I just want to say I like the way this is presented like that, you know, high, medium, low, whatever, looking at the things we're going to consider. So yeah, well done.
Thank you.
I've got every confidence in you and Councillor Webb to get the agenda sorted.
Concentrating on the high priority ones, but because we've only got a few meetings to go really now until the May election. So we'll do our best to get through what we can without making the agendas too packed and difficult to fully explore. So thank you all very much this evening, and I shall close the meeting. Thank you.